Breaking, in what has rapidly escalated into one of the most astonishing, chaotic, and politically seismic moments Westminster has witnessed in modern parliamentary history, the House of Commons was shaken to its very foundation this afternoon when Nigel Farage, the firebrand political agitator whose career has been defined by disruption, populist momentum, and an uncanny ability to redirect the national narrative, rose abruptly from his bench and unleashed a thunderous demand for an immediate general election, a move so unexpected and explosively delivered that it sent shockwaves ricocheting through every corner of Parliament and far beyond, igniting a nationwide frenzy that continues to intensify by the hour. What began as a routine, almost lifeless parliamentary session transformed in an instant when Farage slammed a thick stack of documents onto the bench with a force that echoed throughout the chamber, straightened his posture, as though preparing for battle, and began speaking with a razor-sharp urgency that sliced through the usual procedural monotony, declaring in front of stunned MPs that the British government had exhausted the patience of the nation, that the public had waited far too long for leadership that never arrived, and that the Prime Minister's mandate had passed its expiration date, leaving the country with no choice but to demand a general election now, no debates, no drawn-out committees, no polite windows for future consideration, but an immediate return to the people. For a moment, the chamber froze, as if the entire House inhaled at once, but almost instantly the room detonated into pandemonium. Shouts erupted from every direction, MPs pounded their desks, advisers shot to their feet. And the Speaker struggled, desperately and unsuccessfully, to restore order, as the atmosphere spiraled into a full-scale parliamentary crisis. The eruption could not have come at a more volatile moment. The government has spent weeks stumbling from scandal to scandal, battling plummeting approval ratings, hemorrhaging public trust, navigating deep fractures within its own party, and facing mounting criticism over economic strain, social discontent, and policy paralysis, all of which provided the perfect tinder for Farage to ignite into a firestorm. And ignite it he did. MPs with decades of experience, who have weathered countless parliamentary meltdowns, snapped to attention the moment Farage began speaking, instantly recognizing that the chamber had veered off its expected course and entered the kind of political territory that precedents rarely cover. Journalists in the press gallery shot upright, some nearly spilling their notes, as they scrambled to capture every word, typing furiously as Farage's demand reverberated across the room. Even senior ministers, usually poised and controlled, exchanged frantic whispers, their faces tightening as they realized that this was not merely another fiery speech, but a direct, unfiltered challenge to the government's legitimacy. As the uproar swelled, the Speaker called for order again and again, but each attempt was drowned out by the escalating cacophony, opposition benches shouting for a vote, government loyalists shouting back in outrage, and Farage standing firmly in the center of the storm like a man who had thrown the first stone and now watched the political architecture around him begin to crack. With each sentence, Farage sharpened his indictment of the government, accusing ministers of governing through avoidance, of fearing the very electorate they claimed to represent, and of clinging to power through procedural shields instead of democratic courage. His words struck like hammer blows, fueling the fury, panic, and astonishment already sweeping the chamber. Within minutes, clips of the eruption surged across social media platforms, gaining millions of views in real time. Hashtags demanding an election vaulted to the top of trending lists, commentators flooded live streams with rapid-fire reactions, and an energized public plastered every corner of the internet with questions, memes, breakdowns, and calls for accountability. Radio stations interrupted regular programming to report on the unfolding chaos, news channels cut to live coverage, political analysts scrambled into studios, some declaring the moment the most destabilizing parliamentary confrontation of the decade, while others suggested it could mark the beginning of the end for the current government. Back inside Parliament, the chaos refused to slow. Government ministers huddled in urgent circles, scribbling notes and whispering tactics. Opposition MPs debated whether to align themselves with Farage's demand or strategically keep their distance. Tory backbenchers sat stiff-backed, some stunned, some furious, some quietly pleased that anyone, had forced the issue into the open. Advisers darted in and out of the chamber like messengers in a besieged fortress, delivering updates and receiving new orders. The Speaker, visibly overwhelmed, attempted again and again to restore a semblance of parliamentary protocol, but the chamber had mutated into a battlefield of political shouting matches, accusatory gestures, and frantic strategy whispers. Outside Westminster, the reaction exploded even faster than expected. Within 30 minutes of the confrontation, crowds began forming at the gates of Parliament, first dozens, then hundreds, and soon thousands, as Londoners and visitors alike rushed to witness the spectacle unfolding at the heart of British democracy. Many brought homemade signs, others held their phones aloft, filming live feeds, and some chanted Farage's call for an election with an intensity that shook the very railings of Parliament Square. As the crowds swelled, chants of election now thundered across the streets, echoing off government buildings and registering clearly inside the Commons chamber. Downing Street attempted to regain control of the narrative with a swift statement condemning Farage's demand as reckless and irresponsible, but the statement backfired spectacularly. Critics retorted that democracy is never reckless. Citizens blasted the government for deflecting. Journalists questioned whether the Prime Minister's office had fully grasped the scale of the crisis. And political commentators pointed out that no government confident in its mandate would dismiss public accountability as a threat. The statement, meant to calm the storm, instead poured fuel onto it. As the sun dipped and the city lights flickered on, tension inside Downing Street reached a fever pitch. Leaked reports soon revealed that senior ministers were deeply divided over how to respond. Some insisted on a firm counterattack against Farage, others warned that confronting him directly would legitimize his call, and a few privately admitted that the government had been pushed into an impossible position. One unnamed senior MP, under pressure from reporters outside Parliament, uttered the 7 words that would dominate national headlines within minutes: "We can't rule out anything right now." Those words detonated across TV screens, group chats, talk shows, and online commentary, instantly confirming the growing suspicion that Farage had dragged the government into a vortex of uncertainty from which it had no prepared escape. Meanwhile, Farage emerged from the Commons shortly after the confrontation, stepping in front of the expanding crowds with the confident posture of a man who understood the significance of the moment he had engineered. Surrounded by supporters and cameras, he delivered a brief but electrifying statement, proclaiming that if the government truly believed it still enjoyed the trust of the British people, it should welcome the opportunity to prove it at the ballot box, adding that the door to democracy is open. Whether the government chooses to walk through it is up to them. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause, chanting his name and echoing his demand. As the night wore on, the atmosphere around Westminster took on the energy of a historical turning point. Crowds continued to grow. Journalists broadcast live from streets packed with demonstrators, political strategists huddled in nearby offices, and MPs slipped in and out of side entrances to avoid the escalating swarm of cameras. Analysts across major networks dissected every angle of the crisis, some arguing that Farage had exposed fatal weaknesses in the government, others suggesting he had captured a wave of public anger the government had long underestimated, and some warning that the political system itself was now entering uncharted territory. Inside Parliament, lights stayed on far later than usual as ministers scrambled to create a unified response. Advisers drafted emergency strategies, and whispers circulated that the Prime Minister might be pressured to address the nation sooner rather than later. What makes this moment even more remarkable is not merely Farage's demand itself, but the broader political ecosystem into which it has detonated, a nation weary from economic strain, frustrated by stagnation, desperate for leadership, and increasingly questioning whether those in power still represent the public's interests. Farage did not create those tensions, he simply weaponized them at the most explosive moment possible. And as midnight approached, with chanting crowds still outside Parliament, cameras still flashing, commentators still analyzing, and ministers still scrambling behind closed doors, one undeniable truth settled across the landscape of British politics like a dark, heavy, irreversible shadow. After today, after this eruption, after this unprecedented confrontation in the very heart of Westminster, nothing, absolutely nothing, will ever be the same again.